recording. Okay, good morning, everyone. We are gathering around strategies to address inequities today. It's November 10th. This is our second meeting. This is kind of a spin-off from some of our typical affinity group meetings because we've had a special project, which we will talk about a little bit later in the slides. But I think I know everyone, but I'm Amy Forrest, a consultant with the Jackson Collaborative Network, joined by my esteemed colleague, Sarah.
Yesterday, I was not esteemed. Yesterday, she just introduced me as her colleague, and I was like, what did I do to deserve this? Just kidding. That's a little dramatic. I am Sarah Williams, and I am also a collaborative network consultant with the Jackson Collaborative Network, and Amy and I do this work together as a duo.
Dynamic duo.
That's true.
So we can go through, sorry, go ahead.
Now I was going to say the same thing. If we want to, we have a few people on the call here, and we will not assume that everyone knows each other. So if you'd like to unmute, or if you're comfortable unmuting, introducing yourself, your name, and your organization, if applicable.
I'm Ryan Smith. I am with the Jackson Area Transportation Authority, and I am the Government and Community Relations Manager here.
I'm Dana Ashlock. I'm the Program Director at the Jackson Community Foundation.
And I'm Deborah Hyatt, the Mobility Navigator for the Rides to Wellness at the Jackson Area Transportation Authority.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for being here.
Okay,
And
so I know Ryan and Debbie, you got, is it Debbie? You go by Debbie? Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought I heard Debbie as an introduction yesterday. So Ryan and Debbie, you were able to join us yesterday, which was fantastic. So I apologize if some of this is repetitive, but we'll go through either way because we can share this video out with folks who weren't unable to attend. So not going to talk a lot about affinity groups, just kind of want to do a quick overview. We've done kind of the why we're gathering and what we're doing, but it's really a place for the community to move to action. And these arrows are not necessarily sequential, but kind of gives you an idea of the process that we're trying to accomplish with the affinity groups. Folks typically start out doing a partner profile, which is just a simple way to enter your name and organization and a little bit about what you're doing around system change work in our community. And it's a way to connect with others who are doing similar work. But it's kind of that first step to kind of get into the action planning. So the affinity groups are an area where folks can connect with each other and jump in on conversations. And right now we have 3 affinity groups. One is around building trust between providers and community members. One is around navigating difficult service systems. And this one, or one that this originated as, was addressing inequitable policies and practices. So so it's a great space to kind of gather and partner with each other and talk about issues in our community. And then we move into action planning. So that's really, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's really where we get into our problem statements and strategy design and track and measuring progress and things like that. So that's really where we kind of make our intentions more concrete so that we can kind of build strategies and make differences in our community. So that's a little bit about what we're doing in these affinity groups, just to kind of give an overview. And then this is a little bit more about our project.
so this is a lot of words. I think all of you were at the first meeting we had, so we don't need to like go through every word, but just as a summary of the funding, Sherry Butters was with us last meeting to really describe in detail all of the project limitations, requirements, parameters, maybe is a good word. But really, essentially, the affinity group is designing the process and then also recommending where the funding will be going. So the biggest challenge, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we are where we are, is that we have to have people engaged and involved, and working on that. we will not be, the backbone staff and any other collaborative network people will not be making any decisions around we are working as the facilitators and the guiders and how to help strengthen strategies. But essentially, if we don't have diverse people at the table or those closest to the problem, we're not sure if the funding will continue. It will go back to council with our progress, but that if we will go back and let them know that our status and progress and that we're doing our best, but we are not sure that like the project will continue if we don't have those closest to the problem at the table. Did I miss anything here, Amy?
No, I mean, just to clarify, as far as those closest to the problem at the table, the intent of this funding project was really that they build and decide how the funding gets dispersed. So community members and people with lived experience, we wanted them to be the one to decide how we're going to disperse the funding. So that's really kind of what it boils down to. I mean, not even just at the table, but this whole process of who gets what should come from the community members. So we'll continue to work on that and try to engage folks. But yeah, as Sarah said, we that is part of this whole process. It's not just dollars that are given out. We're hoping to learn from just the way that process works. So yeah, I think the slide, you guys, I think most of you, we've talked a little bit about it, but it's has to be defined by December and implemented between January of 2022 through September. So all of the funds need to be designated by the December 21st, I believe, or decided upon, and then jump right in January and move through till September. So just that little side note about not used to support planning, network level infrastructure, capacity building. It's really about addressing the inequities. And I think that's about it.
I think it's also important, we can talk about action planning later, but any action plan with strategy that's submitted has to show in some way that the problem that you're looking to address has been enhanced or amplified because of COVID or during that time. So and the group will decide what counts as data, right? But like one of the parameters of the funding is that you have to be able to show that the thing you're working on or the thing you're asking for is tied directly to a piece of data that shows that this piece of data was increased, amplified, or made worse or whatever because of COVID or during the COVID timeframe. And then here are the other things that are review from our last meeting. Like Amy said, I thought did a great job of talking about centering community members with lived experience, both being engaged in the design of this process, but also how our partners engaging community members with lived experience in the design of the strategies being considered. So we've talked a lot in the past too about different people have great intentions and have great ideas for strategies, but if they have not engaged community members or involved them in the process of developing strategies, we don't consider that authentic engagement, and we are looking for those pieces when it comes to action planning and when it comes to funding for sure. And then yeah, Amy already listed all of the timelines, and we have that later too. Any questions about anything we covered today or thoughts that have popped up since the last time you've been involved?
I guess I have some questions. So clearly the community foundation's not considering applying for any of the money that's available. And as I've already demonstrated, I would just give it out and keep it for myself. So I feel this tension with this process like, I guess I'm curious on your ends, Amy and Sarah. Like right now it's put out there, if you're interested in this, come to us, like come to these Zoom meetings in the middle of the day, whatever. And I'm just wondering, are there existing community meetings, community things that are happening that maybe you
Would be
should
a
go to?
better appropriate
or-
space. Yeah.
Yeah, that you, instead of asking people to come to you, like, I know you're asking us also as people to fight, to bring people to this table. And, you know, we award grants to grassroots organizations. So I have some nice relationships with people who are passionate about the community and, you know, looked around and saw a need and filled it. But I don't know. I guess I'm just not sure about
Yeah.
what you're asking of us and the I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's a question.
We have, I feel like we can give some answers that are official answers.
Yep.
And the official answer is that council, the network council, decided that this affinity group would be a good space to host this funding. I think the difference is that because we are asking people to tie their funding requests into action plans, that would that an affinity group would be a good spot for action planning and for Amy and I to support action planning. There have not been other options or thoughts about, so to your point, Dana, people don't have to attend the meeting to apply for funding. Anyone can complete an action plan with or without Amy or my help. And this meeting is supposed to really, and the recording, which is why we record it, so if people can't attend, it's supposed to serve as like a guidelines and updates, et cetera. And also, we don't disagree with you. Amy, do you have other thoughts?
No, no, I think that is actually really good insight, Dana, because I think that alternative hours, alternative spaces, us going to them would be appropriate, and we would be willing to do something similar to that. We did do lots of outreach. We've done lots of emailing and personal outreach to grassroots community members to say, please come, we want your voice, and we want you to tell us how to do this, because that's ultimately the goal. Yeah, we are here just to help facilitate and help move people through it and just provide that space. But we would be willing to partner with folks, and we have reached out and we have not gotten an invite to do so. So we would, at this point, and also we were thrown this project, what, 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Sure.
So I think that is really that's the biggest inhibitor, is that we've done emailings, we've done personal emails, we've reached out, we've said, please forward, we've said, please invite. But this has been like, we've had 2 meetings and in the last 3 weeks. And I think timing is a hindrance, because I think we would have more opportunity to go out into some community organizations and sit with them and hear their voices in a different way than joining a Zoom meeting. But I like that, Dana, and that's definitely something we'll consider. We're gonna, we put this out there to see who comes, and then we will reassess after this and figure out if there's an alternative way to do this.
Fair enough. Yeah, I know. I can't imagine what it's like to be given a project, with the timeline that you have.
Yeah.
But boy, there sure is a nice reward at the end of it.
Right.
We just need to get there.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that insight, and please continue to email us and let us know if you've got creative ways and alternative ways of doing this, because we are open to adapting and adjusting based on what we're hearing. So
I just have one more thing and then I'll hush.
no worries.
So having been involved when there was the Financial Stability Network and HIO and Cradle to Career, and then the feeling that those were very siloed. And then this opportunity is just available through one affinity group when there are 2 or 3 other affinity groups.
Uh-huh.
I guess I don't know if that's heading down the same path of, well, the only way you get this is if you do this. So
Yeah.
I just hope that it's open to the people that are involved in the other affinity groups as well.
Absolutely. We did personal outreach to those affinity groups because
Good.
really, I mean, they're all interconnected. So like building trust and navigating service systems are typically about inequitable practices and policies, right? So this seemed to be the best fit because of COVID inequities, but we did personal reach outs to anyone that's doing action planning or anyone that's involved in the other groups and said, even if you're working on a strategy that's about building trust, that also, I'm sure we could tie that into COVID inequities, right? If you're building trust because people aren't using your services and that was amplified during COVID, we would be able to tie that in. So we did do personal outreach, and it's not, we just had to lump this into a space, and this was the broadest affinity group, but we welcome whoever is doing work on any type of strategies that within our root causes, really any of the root causes. So they don't even have to be, if someone's working about, you know, on one of the root causes about making policy or making services known to community members, and that's, we don't even have an affinity group around that, we would still welcome them to join this, help be part of the design process and apply for funding for sure.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, of course.
Can we go back to the previous slide? I'm sorry, one more back. There we go. Can you, I guess, elaborate a little bit on bullet 4, where it says funding cannot be supported or used to support planning, network level infrastructure? So, because I think as an agency, if we were going to be applying for that funding, that's probably more likely than not what the funding would be utilized for in support of the service to continue to provide it. You know what I'm saying? So could you just elaborate a little bit about that?
This might, well, and I want to be sure that I give you a correct answer too. And that might be something that we ask Sherry for, like, specific an answer. But this is really, it's not to support trainings, and it's not to support staffing. It really is to support programming that or an intervention that something was amplified or brought to the light or worsened during COVID. So if you have a current program and you realized that during COVID, this certain population needed extra transportation, and you have data to show this or whatever, and with this money, then if you were to request it, then it would have to go directly to support the program that is addressing that inequity. I'm not sure if Amy has better words or if we might have to, like, get an official answer, but I also don't want to answer you incorrectly.
I do not have better words. So, but I do think it's so when you're doing action planning and you state your problem statement and then you build a strategy around how to address that. So if your problem statement is this particular population in our community was not able to, obtain healthy food options because of COVID, and then your strategy was around instituting available rides for that population to obtain that, then it specifically funds the strategy that's going to close that gap that we saw during COVID. It's more like I think that was trying to move away from like staff trainings on like how to better understand DEI or communications or things that were like a little bit less, like one back off from the actual strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if obviously if awarded the funding, we would be utilizing that funding to support the service that it eliminates those inequities, due to
Yeah.
code. We
Yes.
would be definitely using that to ensure that we can maintain the service for those people. It wouldn't be for staff training or for staffing. I mean, it would be to support an existing service that is already addressing those inequities. You know what I mean? That's
Yep.
kind of where I guess that maybe that's kind of where we're thinking. So we're along the lines that we're thinking of at this point. So I just wanted clarification regarding that.
Yes.
Definitely would want to still be a part of that affinity group. We just need to know whether or not, that would be something that we could address in an action plan to, support an application for the funding, or for a portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, and really, we'll talk about this in a minute, but the action plan is the application, right? So you have your problem statement that folks couldn't get rides, and your strategy is, I'm going to do this in order to close that gap. That's what it needs to directly fund.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. We just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So really in this kind of moving forward, we're going to talk like a little bit of two parts. One is about what is required if you're looking to attain funding. And we kind of touched on this, the action plan. This is just a snapshot or a screenshot of that action plan. You can link on it through our website and go through it. It's a quick, easy link through the website. It's under partner resources, create action plan. And then these are some of the simple questions that we ask, like what is the problem that you've identified, who's most impacted? This is really making sure that you're getting down to that target population. What data do you have? That's going to be, we've seen an increase in people needing A, B, and C during COVID, and this is how we're going to address it. In that's where we talked a little bit earlier about community voice needs to be part of building that strategy. So we need to see evidence that you reached out to community members, those closest to the problem, to say that this is how they would like to see it solved, or that this should be, this is an action that they want to happen. And then talking about what you're committing to doing around that. And then we get a couple of questions that kind of make you look at the kind of visioning. So how will you be successful? And that is kind of simple, like we've closed the gap, and we, in an ideal world, this would have, this is what it would look like. Measurements, it'll be, that's that data piece of tracking and measuring progress. And then the last two are leveraging assets that you currently have. And then what are some of the things that you need, like resources, supports, tools, and things like that. So it's a simple process. It will provoke you to do some thought around building strategies with community voice, and then tracking and measuring and things like that. Any questions around that action planning piece?
So Amy, since this isn't really a grant round,
Mhm.
is there any place where they indicate how much money would help them do this?
That would probably be on what tools, resources, or supports you need to be successful.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a very good question. And I think that is that last bullet, it's not bulleted, but that last piece really gets to, like, in order to make this strategy successful, I will need, $10,000 to obtain rides for, or whatever it might be. But that's a good question. And this is basics. So this action planning is not new to our network partners. And we have a lot of partners that are already doing action planning just to move their strategies forward, unrelated to funding. So we felt like this would be the best way to disperse funding, but it is definitely not specific to this funding round or opportunity. So we definitely, like I said, we've got lots of action plans in there. There are people that are doing great work and want to continue to do the great work and don't necessarily have funding or need funding to move strategies forward. But this was kind of a good way to be able to help partners who do need funding track and measure and quantify their work. If that makes sense.
And just to, kind of piggyback off that, like Amy said, we have been doing action planning in our affinity groups and outside of them, also with partners. And really these questions just serve as a place for Amy and I to help partners think about things. We have some people who are like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. This program isn't making any progress, or I am not sure if we're making a difference, or I haven't, you know, and so there are just ways that like Amy and I can provide tools, or maybe you have like, you're like, oh, I know maybe someone else is doing good work in the community, but I'm not sure if that, you know, and so like, oh, well, let's look at connections. And so really, we have been thought partners for quite a few different network partners prior to this, which is like Amy said, which is why we thought that just having an action plan would be a natural fit for the funding and the strategies, hopefully. And then with Dana's suggestion of maybe putting the exact amount requested in there as well, just and really, frankly, if we can get people to we have yet to have a complete action plan with strategies submitted. So yeah, it is ideally, right? There are many action plans with strategies submitted with X amount of money being asked for, and then the group would decide like, oh, well, this organization asked for $30,000, but we think we should give them 10. Like the intent is to have the group decide all of that.
Yeah, which is a great point. So Dana, when you're asking about requirements or where they should, that's for this group to decide, or the group that, I mean, that design process is up in the air. This is just a framework that they can help organize their thoughts around strategies, but how that looks and how they request and how that the numbers get moved around, that's for this group to decide. So it's really fluid and open as to how that'll work. So, okay.
So this is just a quick slide that we like to include because a lot of people and community partners, network partners are doing really great programmatic work in the community. And if we start saying things like systems change, it can feel overwhelming, or sometimes there's just like a language jargony thing that can be a barrier. So we just like to highlight the importance of both. And so this visual here, the blue circle on the left, right, like the traditional response is the programmatic responses and results. And that is really meeting the need at like the ground level, right? Like it is something that is like getting food to people and really like getting people to and from appointments. And these are things that are like important to do to meet an immediate need. But the real goal that we have is really systemic change and focusing on why these things are happening, right? We talked a little bit about this yesterday in our service systems group around some of the barriers with transportation being a symptom, right? Of like, well, why can't people afford a vehicle? Oh, they don't have a living wage, you know, like why is that happening? And so we will always have this lens and this mindset around pairing the importance of people who are doing important programmatic work with and connecting that to systems work, because without it, it will always just be programs and programs and programs and never actually getting to the root of the issue. And so we believe that systemic interventions will eventually, right, in an ideal world, there will not be a lack of transportation for people. Like that would be the ultimate goal, is that people who need to get where they need to be can just do it. Maybe there's a bus system or like whatever that means, that there's a systemic level change and it's not just programmatic. Let me make sure. Is there anything I missed there, Amy?
Nope, I think you covered that pretty well.
Any questions on this? I know words and things sometimes are confusing, but I like this visual a lot, and I think it helps to understand the importance of both programs and systems. And every time we talk about systems change, we are not negating the importance of program work, and often programs are also addressing systems change, right? Sometimes they just need a little help connecting them.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being late. I couldn't get on. But so are you saying that the programmatic stuff is not, I thought that's all we were gonna focus on. That the
Oh, is
system,
this
like,
Harry? Oh, hi, Harry.
yeah, so capacity building and all the other stuff that goes with systems response, that's not allowed in this, right?
So, so this is a general slide that helps people understand the difference between,
right.
you know,
But
so
specific to the, I'm saying specific to this, the money that's coming from the state.
right.
It
So
has to be, this has to be programmatic on the ground stuff, right?
yeah, so it's not, the funding specifically is not for infrastructure or for training.
Or
But we
capacity
wouldn't,
building.
right, and we would not say, right, so there are different levels you can change systems. But you're right, yes. So, and also this group will be making a lot of those decisions. So if there is an action plan with an intervention that is tied to, yeah, not training, not infrastructure, but also, yes, that's all I'll say. Amy, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I had one other question. So some of the programs I've been working with in Indiana with colleges are prevention programs. Is this can this be a prevention initiative, or is it just going to be more of a response to conditions?
I think there has to be a proof of some sort, a piece of data that shows that something was amplified or grew during the COVID time. So if you have an idea for something to solve a problem that was amplified or made worse or whatever during COVID, then that is the requirement.
Yeah, I can see how this could be confusing because most of the work that we do within the network is around system change, right? It's around collective impact work and system change. This is different. This is
Right.
So I can see why that would be. I'm going to run back to this slide. How that is. This is going to be more about response versus prevention or training or capacity building. So yes, that feels a little confusing the way we're doing it, but yeah, that fourth bullet, we talked a little bit about that, Harry, before you were able to join, and I'm sorry that was the
I'm
struggle to
sorry.
get on.
I just couldn't get on.
Yeah, no.
The other thing, so one of our campaigns and with like Indiana University is on social norming. And since there's an equity issue around people not getting the health information or the program that, like access to not taking up access to vaccine. They all have most people have access to vaccines, but there's a whole piece of people that don't do it. Could it be like a social campaign to get people to do things, or is it basically just feeding people? Or I mean, is it that basic, or can it be more around the concept of feeding what people need to do to promote good health?
I think it's like up to the group to decide, frankly. I mean, if you have data to show that there is a disparity in something, if your data point is that there's a disparity among X population in receiving vaccines or receiving vaccine information or something, and you have an idea that's going to help mitigate that or help the disparity, I think it should be submitted, because the group will be deciding. It will not be Amy and I saying, like, obviously, we can help with these bullet points, but we're encouraging the group to be creative in their ideas.
All right.
I mean,
Great.
I think around that too is it would be more about not just general information as far as prevention, but if during COVID we saw, say, our Black and Brown community did not have access to healthcare information, and that was amplified because of, say, or vaccine distribution. And that is something that typically they don't have great ways of receiving healthcare information. And we saw that would be more of like, it was amplified during the COVID response, and it would be directly toward that population that we saw disparities around, but
Okay,
probably not just general specific healthcare information, if that makes
right,
sense.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
You wanna
Okay.
jump back where we were? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Where are we? So we talked to the group a little bit last time about bringing ideas or concept of what has happened or what has worked in the past. Dana, we're highlighting the Community Foundation here, shout out, of just kind of creative ways that have had more community input. These are some things. So Community Foundation, we talked a little bit about, they're doing a addressing systemic racism grant round now, which is just non-traditional ways of getting community voice in decisions around tackling systemic racism. And then we also, so this kind of jumps back to a resource that our community engagement team did. So community engagement team was part of the old model. And it was really about making sure that we had authentic engagement with community voices, shifting power, making sure voices are elevated in the work that we're doing in the network. And so this group went out and really researched some different models around the nation of folks that have actually done really good work on an engaged community voice in the work that they've done, shifting from, sitting around a table and deciding what community members need to really including their voice. This isn't really specific. These aren't all really specific to funding or grant rounds or things like that. But like the team actually even took a trip out to Cleveland, Ohio to look at Neighbor Up. And it was just the way they gathered in the community and the way they decided on some funding opportunities was all put into like those that are closest to the problem being the deciders. And that's really the goal for this round of funding is there was funds available. The community gathered in a space that was appropriate for that community to gather and was comfortable, and they had access to. They call them gatherings, not meetings. It was, and they talked through what does that look like in the voting process and what makes most sense to distribute those funds. They were the people that made all those decisions. So there is a link that Sarah can put into the chat, and this is the Community Engagement Toolkit. Some of this toolkit is really about authentic ways to have relationships and to communicate and to get community voice. So it's, again, this is really about community engagement and authentic engagement, but these were some models that might be an opportunity to take a look at ways that voice really was elevated from those that were closest to the problem. Did anyone have a chance to look at these prior to it, or is anyone familiar with any of these?
I think, and it's tough too, as we think about ways to do this. And we talked a little bit about it previously because Dana brought it up, but like we're on a pretty ridiculously short timeline, and it makes it really tough to do authentic things like hosting a thing or going to a place or developing this process and making sure we have, just saying it out loud. It's a tough thing to navigate. Should we see if other people have ideas and thoughts on what a design could look like?
Yeah, so we originally intended, depending on the size of the group and who was able to join us today, to look at, we're not going to do breakout rooms because it's not a big enough group. And this will be really preliminarily giving input on the process because we don't have the right people at the table to, or not all of the right people at the table to make this design. We really, we need a more diverse group that will be part of deciding how this process works. But if anyone wants to throw out ideas to kick us off, we're certainly open to hearing input. And then we would have to, like we said, diversify the people deciding this process. But the original intent of this was to kind of look at this twofold. So one was how, and they overlap, they're really intertwined, but one was, does anyone have examples of things that have worked elsewhere, like where community voice has been really elevated and they are the decision makers, and who needs to be part of this design process, I guess. So I'll open it up.
There's about, maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 4 or 5 of us went down to Purdue and got trained in strategic doing. And then we brought that back to the Financial Stability Network, and we did some strategic doing. And it seemed to work in terms of the one project that took off was training people on, I can't remember the name of the training, but it was a training that Regina Pinney and those people did from the nonprofit network on how people just kind of like, it was more of a DEI kind of thing, but it was basically just explaining where people come from so that they're not so rude to them when they face them, you know.
Was it Harry? Was it Bridges Out of Poverty?
Yeah, it was the Bridges Out of Poverty training. And so it was about a 2-3 hour training. And it started, so a lot of us had been trained in that already. And then after we had the strategic doing process, which is fairly quick and easy, it went to the schools, it went to businesses. I think we ended up with like 2,500 people getting trained in it in a relatively short time. I mean, within a year. So strategic doing is one model that, and Flint uses strategic doing in their community development programming.
Harry, for those people that aren't familiar with strategic doing, how would you describe it briefly?
Well, basically it's like small group task oriented. You bring diverse people together. You come up with project themes, and then you rate whether the project is scalable, whether there's enough funding to do the project, if we have enough resources to do the project. And so then they kind of weigh out between several different ideas, and then they vote on it, and then you just go with that program. But you don't go like, it's not like strategic planning where you have like 5 or 6 different buckets that you're putting things into. It's just gets focused down onto one thing to do well. And then you work from there. If you want to expand it, then you work with your network to expand it to other things. But you start with success and you work your way through a project so that you feel successful, and then you move on to modifications in other areas. So we had split the FSN up into about, I think, 4 groups. And we tried to, one was foster care. It was a little bit big for what we were trying to do. The Bridges Out of Poverty group was a smaller group, and it just really was nimble, and it had enough infrastructure with United Way and other places that could help with the funding to make it go pretty fast. And then we just started to train more and more people. It's just one example of, you wanted one that's been successful here.
Yeah.
And that did work. But then we went into another direction with the foundation on some collective impact and design thing. And then I had to drop out of it because I had too much going on. But we did have 4 people get trained in it. I mean, we went down there for a week to Purdue and get trained in it. And it's going on all around the whole. You can just look up strategic doing in Purdue and you'll see the model.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit familiar with that, as well as the Bridges Out of Poverty. I think so. The strategic doing is, from what I understand, is like kind of a model on how to accomplish the tasks that the group decides versus how to disperse the funding. So I think really what we need to focus on at this point is how is the decision made about who gets what funding, right? Versus really putting that strategy into action.
Oh, so we're not funding groups, we're funding strategies, right?
Yes, funding strategies, but it's really, I think what we're looking at to accomplish here is how does that, who decides and how does that decision happen to which strategies get funded?
Well, your suggestion, Harry, is
Yeah.
great for like whoever gets the funding.
Yes, on
Right.
how
Right,
to,
if you're
how to
at, you're at
make
like
that
step
actionable. Yeah.
3 or 4 of like, if someone receives funding, how do we make sure that the community is centered in
Yeah.
all of that? Like that is a great idea for like step 3, you know? So I think that's a great idea, and also highlights the importance of those closest to the problem, or you
Yeah,
know.
that was the problem with the FSN, is most people that went to those meetings were people that worked in the field, were directors or, you know, leaders, even in Jackson, and not really people that were on the ground as much as they needed to be. So that was, I think that was one of the drawbacks, was we didn't, in Flint, they had people, just regular folks from communities come together, and some of their designs were like, instead of tearing down a house, they turned it into a huge greenhouse and had sustainable, a fish hatchery and some sort of, and then the fish, the water from the fish fed plants, and they had all sorts of produce that they grew year round in the foundation of this old house. But it all came from that neighborhood, and everybody in the neighborhood then worked on that project. Whereas when we were doing it with FSN, it was more like, you know, the people that went to the meeting were the people that could afford to go to the meeting, had time to go to the meeting, was part of their workday, just like this meeting. I mean, I'm totally a volunteer, but other people probably, it's their workday, and it's something that happens in the community. So they get to go to this, but they still sort of get paid for it while they're here. And then the people in the community don't attend because they're working. So,
Right. Yeah.
you know, I mean, you know, having meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning is not real conducive to having like your ground people.
Right. Right.
there.
Frontline folks. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I agree. You know, anyway, all of us were trained the trainers, so we all have a bunch of material on it, just in case somebody needs it or whatever. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think that could be a great resource for folks once the decision on who gets funded and they're working to implement strategies. Yeah, I would definitely appreciate, you know,
Yeah.
any tools or resources that I might need to move to action on those for sure.
Well, so what about groups that don't, so this is another question. So is it just groups that actually have on the boots ground programming? Or could it be, so like, I'm sitting right now at St. John's United Church of Christ, where we have the United Caring Center. And one of our people that are in the church with us is the NAACP. And so I'm just wondering, would we involve some people that we could do like that to some of the groups that are more advocacy oriented groups, or do they have to be provider group, you know, program provider groups? Like we have a food kitchen, so I could do something with the food kitchen.
I was gonna say, what are they doing?
Well, the NAACP, I mean, they.
No, I know what they do, but like, I think the answer would be what strategy has been proposed.
Right. Well, I haven't got those yet. I haven't got that far.
Yeah, I think
I'm just trying to pick people that
yeah.
we could actually work with that would actually represent, like the
Yes.
South Side Ministerial Association, which is just basically a lot of African-American ministers. You know, I mean, there's groups of people that work every day in the community.
Yeah,
That's who we.
those are the people we would like at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both to decide how they're going to pass out the funding and to
Yeah.
talk about strategy work that they're doing. So it's
Yeah.
twofold.
Okay.
They should be
Alright.
the ones that say, hey, we're going to take this funding and throw it in the air, and the first one to hit the floor gets the funding. I mean, if that's what they decide, that's what happens. I mean, that is the learning piece that we're hoping to obtain from this, is we want to have them be decision makers on who and what gets funded, and then strategies that they're funding, as long as they come from community voice that says this is the need because we saw this during COVID, then
Right.
they put forth their strategies and
Cool.
we move forward with it. So
All right. I'm sorry for dominating the time. I'm trying to get this clear in my head.
appreciate the thought, you know, thinking it through, and we're all trying to get it clear too. So
Just a quick question. Has anybody actually talked to Daniel Mahoney? I know he just got the new mayor and he may have been busy up until now, but he is part of the commissioners and the NAACP and different things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that he would be a great opportunity to, if we could get his time to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
That's-
we can. We have reached out, I guess, mostly to on the ground, people working on the ground, grassroots things. I don't think it would be bad. I know Daniel Mahoney's been involved with other network things, but we don't,
We could-
I think
yeah.
that would be a great.
Because he's
person
got
to
like a
reach out
bunch of
to.
different hats right now.
Right. I mean, Residents in Action and Partial to Girls, there are so many groups that are doing great work, and he might be able, although he might not be able to come, he might be able to say, I know this thing's going on. They can, if you can meet with them to find out, what they're trying to accomplish. Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on the who's, the what's, the how's?
The other one I was thinking of was Love Inc. Like they have that whole church group that comes together and they see day to day, hey, we need birth certificates, we need transportation, we need bus passes, we need this, we need that. And they have a whole church group that comes together throughout the community. And it doesn't just touch the city residents, it touches Vandercook, Michigan Center, Brooklyn, different ones.
Debbie, do you have a relationship with them that you might be able to reach out and invite them? Because yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I know Shantae, and actually Shantae is Daniel's brother,
Oh,
who is the executive director of Love Inc. And so, yeah, I didn't think of them prior to today, but while
Yeah.
we're talking, I'm like, hey,
that would be amazing. And we'd appreciate, if you could reach out and just let them know a little bit about the opportunity and
And you've
let
got
them
all
know.
the slides and the links, for everything, but that would be, especially if you have a relationship, because that would be a blind email from us. But if you have, a connection, that would be great.
right. Yeah, I will reach out to both of them.
That would be great. Okay, so let's move forward. If I can forward my slides there. Are we missing anything else that we needed to?
Can I say something, Amy?
Yes, please do, Dana.
So I feel like there's also kind of a messaging thing. Like, I know you guys have not wanted to call this a grant round, but like it or not, you have money to award. And it's very difficult giving away money. Surprisingly difficult.
I was going to say that's such a kind of oxymoron, but
It's surprisingly difficult.
It is.
So I feel like the outward messaging to people that you want to attract to this, maybe the language needs to be simpler, because I feel like when we're in the meeting like today talking about it, we're learning, okay, there's this whole other goal that you have as the network. You have this goal that some sort of process is developed and that there are these things. But if I am at a nonprofit, or I'm doing the wonderful work that I'm doing as a passionate community member with my grassroots group, that does not speak to me. Like I couldn't care what you hope to get out of it.
That's right.
But I do care that, look, there's a funding opportunity for me, for the things that I'm doing, for what how I have seen COVID affect the community that I'm working with. And I would like some funding to help address that or whatever. So I feel like,
yeah, marketing has not been very well done.
well, I'm not saying marketing hasn't.
No, but I mean, you're
I don't
right.
want- I'm not,
Changing the way we're looking at this, like saying, we want your voice, we want you to be the deciders, we want you to get the funding, like that's a different, yeah.
Well, and
I-
there's also a part too, Dana, like, right, like if we're going to be honest right now, like there's also the timing of like, hey, we have money. We're trying to be very clear that we are not going to be the deciders of who gets the money because of who we are, how we sit, positions of power, et cetera, et cetera. So the messaging that when we are allowed to have conversations with people, there's maybe a different message than when it goes out through a newsletter or different. And like, and also, you know, especially like if it comes from Sherry, there are different like requirements she wants to hit on, but we have highlighted like there's a funding opportunity, and then also been very clear about we will not be the decision makers. And it feels like both of those are important. Are you,
Yeah.
is that, I mean,
And I understand that too. Like I say that even in my own job. I am not a decision maker. I don't have a vote of the grants committee. I'm a liaison between applicants and the grants committee. I'm not a decider. So I understand that you want to get that out there. I'm just thinking, if I were somebody who was aware of how COVID affected the community and I could use some dollars, I might not need some messaging that just makes it clear, like, oh, this is about COVID affecting the community and they have some money. I want to go to that meeting or whatever.
Yeah, that's good insight. We have to simplify it, pare it down, let them know that they're the deciders and they're getting funded. It's, yeah. Simplify, simplify, simplify. That would be the goal.
You're sharing the power.
Exactly. Shifting the
Trying.
power. I mean, that's the goal, is shifting the power. Well, we don't know what our, the community knows what they need, not us. And we've sat for years going, well, let's try this. Let's give them this. And it doesn't work. Okay. Any other thoughts before we kind of move forward with this?
Has anybody, and I was kind of going back through the emails that have been sent out regarding these meetings, has anybody from Disability Connections been reached out to, do you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Laura.
Laura was on our call yesterday. And
Oh, that's
she,
right. Yeah.
yeah, so she, I guess that would be saying she, but I don't know if there are other people there, but yeah, we were.
That's right. I remember her being here now.
Yep.
I know one of our board members, Mindy Albert, is from Disability Connections. Is we've got a relationship with them. So it was just
Well,
something to.
Well, again, like if we're gonna echo, I know Deborah's reaching out to people. I mean, if you Ryan, if you feel comfortable like sending an email of like, hey, just so you know, this funding is happening. Really, and we're also looking like, I don't know, honestly, what Disability Connection is doing, or like, I know different people have different roles, but maybe people know different people in the community. Like Laura knows different people than you, and you know different people than me. And so the idea is that, is there something that's happening, right? The program, or is there something that needs to happen because of this COVID timeframe? And can we like hurry up and gather them,
Excellent. Well, this slide just kind of talks about the project planning. So today it was looking at designing the process. And again, we need to get different folks, diversify our group to help move forward with that. Hopefully by the 18th. So we have a meeting next Thursday scheduled. And that is when we need to look at culminating the ideas and coming up with decisions around what that looks like. You'll likely receive emails in between to kind of move forward with some of this. And if the group decides, because again, this isn't Sarah and I leading this, we're just facilitating, but if the group decides we need some other type of meeting in a different convening in a different time, we're open to being adaptable to that. The blue you'll see is just actions that need to happen. They're not specific to meetings, but we're hoping that action plans are completed by the 1st, so that the group can look at what strategies are available or put out there or looking to get funded. And then that first or second week in December is where we'd be like looking at the different strategies and deciding if the group would be, taking a look at what makes most sense for funding. And then the 16th, this group would meet again and make decisions on which strategies are funded, and then would go to the council for approval on the 21st. So any questions on that timeframe?
And just a reminder that partner action plans, that is serving as the application or the RFP or whatever. They are all the questions that we ran through earlier on and how to complete an action plan. And we will not be spending time in these meetings because we have a lot to do before now and then. But in between the meetings, we're happy to schedule individual one-on-one meetings with anyone if you'd like to walk through an action plan, or if you're not sure what you should put in what field. Amy and I have done a lot of individual action planning, and we love those conversations. Also helps us understand what is happening in the community. So just a reminder of that.
So on the 21st, when everything goes to the council, will they, because I know the deadline to give the funds away, so they'll what, just go into like a breakout room and decide and then come back to everyone? Is that what the plan is there?
Ideally, this group would be making the decision. So
Oh.
once we diversify this group and get the right people involved, like more community members, this group would say, okay, we have these 16 strategies, and we as community members think that these 7 should be funded. They would then send that to council for approval. And I doubt that council is going to argue, because the whole point is community members decide, right? So it'll go for a final approval from the council, but it's really up to once we diversify this group, it's up to this group to decide, this is how we want to make our selection process happen. And these are the 4, 7, 15 that we want to see funded, and at these dollar amounts. And then we'll present it. And then someone from this group, obviously not a staff person, but whoever, is kind of moving forward, we'll take that to the council and say, this is what our group decided the process looks like, and this is who we're recommending based on that.
Well, and as officially, the council can like decide differently, but we don't anticipate that. Like, if we have the right people and all of the people at the table, and the process has gone as it should, and the recommendations happen as they should, then we're just assuming that council will approve it. Although officially we have to say they're allowed to decide differently, but we don't anticipate that.
Any other questions? I know we talked a little bit earlier about the funding. It may result in the fact that if there are not people with lived experience deciding on how the things get funded, we may bump it back to council and say, we don't have the right people making decisions. We're not shifting power. And that might, and they might need to kind of gurgle that up and decide then next steps. That's just our little flyer about next upcoming meetings. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? There's our website to the jacksoncollaborative.network.org. That's got all the partner resources where you can do your action planning and find all the good stuff about us. Please feel free to reach out to us in the meantime with people, with ideas, with concepts of how we can make sure that community voice is heard in these meetings. And we're willing to do whatever needs to happen to make that happen. That's competitive. Anything else from folks? All right, well, thank you. I appreciate you guys joining us this morning. And have a great rest of your Wednesday. Hopefully some of you all get tomorrow off. Nope.
I'm gone.
Good for you.
The authority is open, but I am closed.
Ah, all right.
Well, thank you for having us again.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us again. I know that, but hopefully you guys are the experts now. You'll bring everyone to the group.
Right.
Mhm.
All right, thanks
gotta
you
come.
guys.
We've
Bye,
got a
everybody.
couple meetings coming up that we'll put it out during those meetings as well. That we're
Fantastic.
looking for more diversified people from the community to join this group too.
That'd be great.
We can do that at our board meeting, and I have an LTAC meeting next week that I can put that out at as well.
That'd be great. We appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
That's
Guys,
great.
everybody have a great day.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you
All right,
too.
bye.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.